Hello everyone and welcome to Pick a Disc. I'm your host Matt Latham, and this is the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And the disc picker for today is Andy Williams from the Frame to Frame podcast, and he has picked the American Idiot album by Green Day from 2004. Now, apparently what's going to happen is that I'm going to be talking to Andy, and we're going to be talking about the album and stuff around it, including the circumstances and the themes that the album covers and stuff, etc, etc, etc. If you've listened to the podcast before, you know what to expect. If you've listened to this for the first time, you know what, I'm going to shut up and leave this as a surprise for you. And if you do like this, surprisingly, and you want to continue listening to the podcast, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice and all that kind of things, you know. There's also kind of reviews on places like iTunes or Apple Podcasts, as it's called now. And there's also ratings you can do in Spotify. Now, there's quite a few people listening to this podcast on Spotify. I'm assuming they're expecting something else, but the people that are listening to it on Spotify, I'm too scared to look at retention numbers, so it's probably people that listen to the intro and then stop listening for whatever reason they want to. Tie back to the tagline of the podcast there. So, if you do listen on Spotify, please give us a rating and remember to commit opinion fraud and lie about us being good. So give us 5 stars, even if you don't think that we're worth 5 stars, because I want more people to lie about this podcast, and then we can break the system. Come on, Joe Rogan, I'm coming after you. So, so with that, I am going to just press play on the little interview that I have with Andy about Green Day's American Idiot. Nasty habit I've started picking up is, for an audio medium, the icebreaker bit where I kind of like at the very, very start, usually is because I've got questions about what I can see on the actual video, which is slightly annoying for people listening to this, I think, but tough. So if
I'd have known, I'd have put the record up there. I've got the vinyl.
Actually, the thing in the background is the what looks like, is it the Chicago Bulls? Is it basketball behind you?
Oh, so that is Michael Jordan performing a dunk.
Right. Okay.
There, and there you've got some Kubrick stuff.
Right. Okay. And I can see a guitar at the very top of a bookshelf as well.
Yeah, and there is another one sort of there.
Yes. Okay.
As well, but
pointing out for all the listeners. That's the latest edition of Matt Talks About Stuff He Can See But People Can't. My guest is Andy Williams from the Frame to Frame podcast. How you doing, Andy? You right?
I'm good, thank you, Matt. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. At the time of recording, we're kind of gearing up to Christmas, so we're a few days away. Which
I'm avoiding wrapping. It's great.
Yeah. So, but by the time that people listen to this, Christmas will be a much distant memory, and we are possibly in lockdown. So you'll probably listen to this like staring at the windows. So I hope January is a lot better than what we think January might be. But yeah, we're not here to talk about the current events or what potentially could happen in a month's time. We're here to talk about an album, aren't we, Andy?
We are.
We're
here. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to discussing this and really getting into the bones of it, because this is one of the most formative albums in my musical tastes. So
Andy, I mean, because I'm assuming that the listeners have already seen, and I always find it quite funny when like people are kind of build up to and not reveal what they're talking about, even though it's plainly written on the podcast that they are doing. But for ceremony, would you like to tell the lovely listeners and surprise them with which album you're going to be talking about today?
I really want to list a different album now, just to throw you off.
Oh, please don't, because
because I sent you like 4 or 5 different options anyway. So
yeah.
But no. So today we're talking about Green Day's American Idiot from 2004.
Yes, Green Day's American Idiot, the 7th album from the American rock band Green Day, released on September the 21st, 2004 by Reprise Records, which is a concept album dubbed a punk rock opera by the band members. American Idiot follows the story of Jesus of Suburbia, a lower middle class American adolescent anti-hero. The album expresses disillusionment and dissent of a generation that came of age in a period shaped by tumultuous events such as 9/11 and the Iraq War. So this was released around when I was 9. Yeah, I was just about a couple of weeks before my 19th birthday. This album came out. So yeah, this was around 2004. So there was a lot, particularly guitar bands and kind of rock music were beginning to kind of kick back in again. So you had the kind of holdover from the pop punk stuff from a few years earlier, Blink-182. We'll go into a bit more detail about Green Day specifically a bit later on. But yeah, so the American Idiot album was massive. It was big. It was a lot everywhere. It was everywhere. Like the title track was everywhere, and it was just, particularly at the time. And again, we'll probably talk about the surrounding kind of political things because it's tied into the album as well about what's happening at the time. It was hard not to miss this album. It was big.
Literally everywhere.
It was everywhere.
It was absurd. Yeah,
it was ubiquitous. It was ubiquitous and possibly a formative album for quite a lot of people. Like I'm assuming, as we were just talking beforehand, potentially yourself as well. So why have you picked this album?
Well, I sort of already alluded to how formative it was for me in terms of my music taste. So I was 13 when this came out. And although I'd been listening to sort of guitar-based albums before this, like I'd been listening to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, I'd been listening to Blink-182, and then when this came out, it was just a real shot in the arm. It was like, oh, wow, rock music sounds like this, and it's got these messages behind it. And it's kind of what everyone I knew that was listening to things like hip-hop, they would have said about hip-hop, well, you're actually saying so many things. These are poets. These are people that are saying so many deeper meanings behind what they're actually singing about. Whereas, you listen to Blink-182 with all these sort of childish songs, shall we say. Family-friendly show. So what this sounded like to me was just, it mixed everything that I really already liked about music and then just elevated it above that. And I think because of that, like I say, I look back and it was one of probably about 4 albums I thought of picking for this. But the reason that I ultimately chose it was that it came out right in that sweet spot where, I mean, everyone ultimately surely still listens to music from when they were 13 and looks back at it through rose-tinted glasses.
I'll have to get back to that. That's a conversation for a completely different episode. Yeah, so it's kind of like formative as well. So can you remember the first time you listened and heard of Green Day? Can you remember where you were?
So I used to watch Kerrang, the TV show, the TV channel, an awful lot. I used to flick around music videos and whatever, to the extent it would really annoy my family because I'd sit and watch something for like 10 minutes and then an advert break would come because, kids these days won't know what an advert break is.
Yes.
So I'd flick over to the music channels. So I remember hearing American Idiot on Kerrang and seeing the music video for it with the American flag draped in green, which I subsequently learned was green paint and washing up liquid to make sure that it ran off correctly. And then you got Billy Joe with his eyeliner and the sort of black shirt and black trousers and red tie, and it was just very bold and very in your face. And it was that I came across and I thought, wow, I need to hear this more.
Right, yeah. So yeah, the old oh look, Sky One's got an ad break. Flip over to the.
Absolutely, it was the amount of and I do it occasionally today, and it's still the same videos they're playing. Like the amount of videos that I see on Kerrang now that I used to see from like 2004, 2005, they're the exact same. That makes me sound really old, doesn't it?
Oh, you've reached that age already, guys. Oh, it's the exact same. It's never change. Yeah, no, I can fully remember the kind of flip over. I found I've got no way of playing them now, but I remember a few years ago before I moved, finding a bunch of old recorded tapes, and I used to record episodes of Buffy and Angel from Sky One, on long play. So so I'd have 8 hours.
So you make the tape last for twice as long.
Yeah, so I had 8 hours worth of. But yeah, but because it was Sky, it was recording just the one signal. So this was before all your TiVos and your streaming for anyone who So basically, if you change the channel, it'll record it, and I'll be rewatching it. I mean, I've not rewatched it for years because I got the actual VHSs. But if I was rewatching them, you'll get to the adverts, and you'd fast forward through the adverts. But you can see me flicking through all, and part of me wishes I still had those tapes because I'd be so interested to figure out what what videos are on there and stuff. But yeah, so you just
They're
flick
an
through.
absolute
And
time
then,
capsule.
Yeah.
It'd be great to still see it.
you'll flick through, and then like in about a year's time, I think they kind of clocked on what was going on. So what happened is that you'd flip over, and then all the music channels had timed their adverts to be at the same time and stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean, I remember years ago. This is like I remember exactly because we had to move house for a few months because of subsidence and stuff. So it was in a different house, and I remember the one night I just ended up recording The Box for 8 hours. I recorded The Box for 8 hours overnight, and I don't know why
It's
he
the
never
best
did it
type
again.
of music as well.
Yeah, it's all like kind of pop up mixture and stuff, and I remember flicking through all that, like fast forwarding, like, and having 8 hours worth of The Box, and like going, and
What year are we talking as well?
2000.
Oh, okay. So you'd have had great stuff like Atomic Kitten and Hearsay.
Oh yeah, yeah, and a few times, including a song called 3AL by a pop critic called So Unique. Now, if people search for the We Made This Program Cerebral Jukebox with Carl Bryan, you'll hear me talking about this song that reached number 60 on the charts, and it's a time capsule of pop music. And but yeah, and like occasion, but I do remember flipping over and going like, oh my god, and flicking over, and that song, there was a time where that song seemed to be on the box all the time, and no one else can remember it. So I don't know whether it was, I don't know whether I'm kind of,
It was just you.
Yeah,
It was a poltergeist kind of thing.
yeah, like I was just flicking over, and whether, I don't know, the box was actually just showing every single person who had Sky Digital a completely different video at the same time. So I don't know, but yeah, but no, oh man, nostalgia, eh? But yeah, I can fully remember the.
It's not what it used to be.
Yeah, but yeah, you flick over. You had Magic, you had Q, you had Kerrang, Scuzz. Yeah,
Scuzz was great.
yeah, Scuzz.
MTV,
I think was
obviously, with all its sort of offshoots.
Oh yeah, you had MTV, which didn't play music, but then you had brand new shit. You had MTV2, which was slightly alternative and rock. I remember going to MTV Base because part of me was still kind of into rap music at the time, and yeah, so it was good to kind of just get an idea of what was popular at the time and stuff. So I'm assuming this meant that American Idiot was, and the song American Idiot was your kind of first entry into Green Day then.
Yeah, absolutely. Shortly afterwards, the greatest hits compilation that they'd done from everything up until the point of American Idiot, that actually re-entered the charts as a result. I mean, spoilers about the rest of the episode, but because the American Idiot album kind of did so well, it piqued that interest and people went back and bought international super hits. So I did exactly that, and then went back and discovered the rest of the back catalogue, and fell in love with all sorts of different albums that way.
My history with Green Day is, I'm going to refer back to a previous episode, because if anyone's listened to the episode I did with Dan about the Untitled album with Blink-182, we had a conversation actually about about kind of the sweet spot of Blink-182 and the kind of someone around my age. So there was a moment, because of just for those who haven't listened to what the idea, basically I've got friends who are slightly old, I've got friends who are a couple of years older than me, and friends who are a couple of years younger than me, who I didn't know at school. So I've only known them like for years after school and stuff. So, and what I found was that anyone who's slightly about 3 or 4 years older than me, they are really really into Dookie, or so Dookie and Nimrod and those album stuff, and they're kind of really big Green Day fans. My entrance into pop punk was Blink-182 and Enema of the State and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, because I kind of a couple of years after Nimrod, so I kind of missed the Green Day phase. So I kind of got into the team Blink-182 category rather than Green Day. But then American Idiot came out, and a couple of years younger than me, it's kind of got into American Idiot era Green Day, perhaps more than Blink-182. And I think, and the chat I had with Dan was like, it's quite interesting about how that kind of happens, in that they kind of got like this Green Day sandwich. Yeah,
it's I guess when you've got an album that was as big as it's a similar sort of thing with people like My Chemical Romance, right? You have people that were slightly too old for it, that listened to this stuff beforehand and was like, oh no, they've sold out with the Black Parade. But then the people that have come in the sweet spot of the Black Parade, that is like an album for a generation.
Yeah, and again, I know people that are probably even younger, a few years younger than yourselves and Dan from that episode. They were probably a lot more into. They got into probably MCR because MCR was probably bigger than they were probably the next. They weren't pop. They weren't punk. They were more emo, weren't they? But they were probably the kind of it band at the time. And it's kind of it's weird how that kind of happens and stuff, I think. But yeah. So I never really kind of listened to Green Day other than the odd singles, and you hear them on the radio because there was ubiquity on the radio. I knew the words to American Idiot. And that's purely
osmosis of just it being around.
Osmosis, yeah. But I never had it. I mean, I never owned a Green Day album, and to this day and to this point, I'm pretty sure until halfway through last week, when I started prepping to this album, that was the first time I've ever listened to this album all the way through. So
wow,
yeah, I have never. So aside from the singles, I've never heard any of the. Well, I tell a lie, and I'll tell you why in a second. I have never heard the album of this all the way through, so a lot of these songs I'm hearing for the first time.
Am I hearing the asterisk of performed by the actual performers?
Yes, because I have. I've not listened to anything of surrounding it since. I have actually seen American Idiot, the show.
But what did you think of that? That's okay then. That's something in and of itself.
We'll get back to that. Perhaps a bit later on when we talk about the live bit. But and that was several years ago. And I'm trying to see if the ticket is on the thing in front of me, but I don't think it is. No,
I think it toured quite extensively.
I saw it in Birmingham, but I'll get into a bit more detail on that. But so that's kind of my history, Green Day. So I kind of knew the songs and stuff, and I think I've told this story in the podcast before, but also the first day I was on a small group tour of Japan. We went to a karaoke bar, and I was looking through, and then found, oh wow, there's a Green Day song. I know the song's this one. This would be good to do. And I kind of forgot the second verse of it, so I decided to sing Basket Case on karaoke, and then realizing halfway through that, hang on, yes, some of the words used in this are probably. I've forgotten the whole second verse of Basket Cases. Perhaps not is the best thing to do when you just met people about 3 years ago. But
I mean, I started singing that too. So I sing my kids to sleep, and I started singing like a chilled out version of Basket Case. No, I'm completely changing the song. I'm going to go back to doing like another version of Time of Your Life because this is not happening. They're far too young for this.
So like it goes, I'm singing. It goes, I went to. Oh shit. It's like said my line. Like, okay, yeah, this is quite embarrassing, but then on the last day, about 10-11 days later, I rapped the whole of Men in Black by Will Smith. So and that's a much better song to do at karaoke.
Can you still do that?
Oh yes, there is several videos of me doing Men in Black. There is also one that I can't find, which will never see the light of day, where I am quite under the influence, dressed as a Men in Black for Halloween, singing the song. But can
you do Nod Your Head is the question. You can do Men in Black, but can you do Men in Black 2?
There's a chick, right? Serena, make me sick, right? But as worthless the whore, she'd be tripping like something.
Threatening me and my men trying to get the light.
Yeah.
Thinking she's Superwoman with Black Kryptonite.
Yeah, no, I can't remember that bit. And and the Pitbull one for the third one. See, yeah, you should have done the song from Men in Black 3. Wild West I probably know, but so American Idiot is one of the things that I remember listening to, and a podcast that has finished a while ago. Was a podcast called the TV Talk Machine with Tim Goodman and Jason Snell. And they were still making episodes around the time that Donald Trump was elected, and there was talking about the immediate reaction. He goes, "Oh, you're going to feel the kind of reaction of this in art and creativity and TV and stuff." And for Tim Goodman on that, he was the former chief critic at the Hollywood Reporter. But he's also a keen music listener. Says the first place you'll see it is music. The first time you'll see it is music. So it's the immediate aftermath. You'll feel it in music. And the 2004 when American Idiot came out is a few years after 9/11, which which until arrival of COVID was probably still the biggest. Well, the COVID pandemic is now overtaking it, but was the last major world global event that changed a lot of basically how the world relates to each other, and I think, but then the coronavirus pandemic is the next one after that. But for 20 years, the biggest thing was 9/11, and in the aftermath of 9/11, you'd have a lot of art and songs that would be talking about George Bush. You'd be talking about 9/11 and the war on terror and the immediate aftermath of that. And one of the biggest events in that was the Iraq War, where George W. Bush and Tony Blair, I think NATO was it NATO? Went in to try and find these weapons of mass destruction and ended up doing an invasion of Iraq to try and fight against Saddam Hussein. And that was pretty much also after the war in Afghanistan when they got into Afghanistan. I'm getting confused now. I don't know whether NATO was Afghanistan. I really can't remember. But anyway,
I think NATO was Afghanistan, so at the time you got to remember I was 10, 11, 12 sort of thing. I think it was the US and the UK that went into Iraq under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, and then Afghanistan was the NATO effect. But
I
can't be quoted on that.
The Afghanistan was the immediate aftermath, was the immediate retaliation for 9/11, but the Iraq War was afterwards, and I can't remember off the top of my head about popular opinion at the time. I think the popular opinion was that the Afghanistan retaliation was slightly more justified because they had claimed responsibility for 9/11. And then there was a whole thing about the war on terror that arranged from that. I think the consensus or the alleged ideas was that they wanted an excuse to invade Iraq, and they used the weapons of mass destruction. I remember there was an awful lot of discussion about oils and oil prices, and you want to get in there because that's where the reserves are, that sort of thing. Yeah, and then that's what probably led to the Second Gulf War, which was the Iraq War. And then there's a lot of art, then a lot of bands and musicians, television series around that time started building kind of work form on this war of terror and the war in Iraq. And this, for example, this album is specifically kind of critical of kind of the Iraq War, George Bush, and but also the kind of like sense of kind of like patriotism that was like developing at the time, around the time of which got kind of like the military reactions towards Iraq stuff. If I'm sounding weird, I'm not much of a political commentator, so I can't really delve too much into the kind of aspects of that. If anyone knows a lot more about it, feel free to educate me. American Idiot, I think, was one of the biggest albums of that movement that were kind of kind of vocally
sort of like the Fahrenheit 9/11 sides of things.
Yes.
And
yeah.
That sort of stuff that was coming out as sort of anti-government, as much anti-government, anti-war. It wasn't necessarily against specific sentiments, but it was specifically against the Republican government at the time, led by George Bush, that was seemingly trying to effectively colonize an area of the world for America, to say, right, we need to put a pipeline here. And it's explicitly mentioned in probably 2 songs is where they specifically say about the government being awful. But and there's literally the line of "Sieg Heil to the President Gasman." Like, there's so much within that one line about the context of the time and why Billy Joe decided to write what he did.
Yeah, and because I think it's interesting as well is that when you first mentioned this, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of remember this, and the thing that threw me was that I was surprised that it was out in 2004. I was convinced this was earlier. I was convinced this was around 2002 because of it being a reactionary to the George Bush administration and the war in Iraq. But no, it's 2004. So this being September 21st. So this was at least 3 years. So the kind of the dust had settled, and I think the talks, and I think Ground Zero was on the forms of kind of. It was either created or there was
memorial at that
memorial.
Sort of place,
yeah. So this was the kind of the immediate reactionary kind of period to 9/11 had died down, and we was getting on, and it was the next phase of this war on terror and the reaction that the world was having because of these attacks and stuff. Because off the top of my head, I was trying to remember the biggest album that I remember listening to that was about that was, there was two albums actually, and it was the Eminem Show from Eminem and Encore. I think Encore was a few months after this, because the Encore was much more about, was a lot more, there's like, I think Mosh is the song that Eminem did, which was like rips George Bush to shreds very explicitly. But the Eminem Show had a lot more about the reaction on the war of Afghanistan and stuff, and I think that was like kind of my entry into how easy and reactionary music can be. But this song being from the punk genre being anti-establishment by default.
But it's Inception, isn't it? You think back to the start of the punk movement in '77. You had "God Save the Queen" by the Sex Pistols. It was literally two fingers up at the establishment. Yeah, and this feels like it feels kind of at home with its message, so to speak. So but it doesn't feel like it's just about that as well. It's a lot more about the domestic issues. It's more about domestic issues as well. It's more about like the life and kind of almost modern poverty and drugs and religion. So and I want actually to expand on this a bit in a second. But I was surprised that how much of it wasn't just about Iraq. It was more about the kind of domestic stuff. So yeah, when you go into so American Idiot basically being the two barrels at George Bush going, here you go, for bang sort of thing, and completely highlighting and tearing him apart. But when you look at something like Jesus of Suburbia, the storytelling throughout that is far more focused on the war, basically the war at home. And this is something that is highlighted, I think, particularly on the musical. But the fact that you then get introduced to your characters, you get introduced to a setting, and the fact that they want to go, and ultimately that song ends with them leaving. So that's when they then begin to go on the quote-unquote holiday. So that's how the album begins to bleed into itself. American Idiot's kind of the outlier to that. American Idiot is basically the lead single, which is relatively disconnected to the rest of the album. But what it manages to do is set up the context for the story. Yeah.
There's a little paragraph about the lyrics on the Wikipedia page. I'll probably just have a quick breeze through, which gives you a summary of the story of American Idiot. So, American Idiot, concept album that describes the story of a central character named Jesus of Suburbia, an anti-hero created by Billy Joe Armstrong. It is written from the perspective of a lower middle-class suburban American teen raised on a diet of soda pop and Ritalin. Jesus of Suburbia hates his town and those close to him, so he leaves for the city. The second character introduced to the story is St. Jimmy, a swaggering punk rock freedom fighter par excellence. What's her name? A Mother Revolution figure is introduced as a nemesis of St. Jimmy in the song She's a Rebel. The album's story is largely indeterminate, as the group was unsure of where to lead the plot's third quarter. In this sense, Armstrong decided to leave the ending up to the listener's imagination. The two secondary characters exemplify the record's main theme, rage versus love, in that while St. Jimmy is driven by rebellion and self-destruction, What's Her Name is focused on following your beliefs and ethics. Jesus of Suburbia eventually decides to follow the latter, resulting in the figurative suicide of St. Jimmy, which is revealed to be a facet of his personality. In the album's final song, Jesus of Suburbia loses his connection with What's Her Name as well, to the point at which he can't even remember her name. It's not a cohesive story in the sense of perhaps...
it's not like Tommy in that sense.
Yeah, or it's not like War of the Worlds from Jeff Wayne that we just had a couple of episodes ago. Or even Grand Don't Come For Free from The Streets from all the way in episode 20. There's a lot of concepts, there's overlapping ideas, but there's a lot more open to interpretation.
Yeah, well, I think that it's obvious for me that Billy Joe saw elements of himself within St. Jimmy, because he played that character on the stage. Like, he played that character for a little bit on the Broadway version of the stage show. But I think the idea of leaving the third and fourth quarters up to the listener's imagination, I think they're there. And that might just be me ascribing something to what I've listened to. And like I said, I've listened to it so many times at this point that I just sort of go, well, I think so that sort of summary took you up to She's a Rebel. I think Extraordinary Girl and Letterbomb they're kind of they're the songs you would skip, right? If you're going to skip anything on this album, they'd be those two. But I think what they do is create that kind of angry atmosphere, especially in Letterbomb. There's the stoking idea of a child singing "Nobody likes you, everyone left you, they're all out without you, having fun." And then when you go back to "Wake Me Up When September Ends," there's clearly some kind of tragedy to then the second sort of epic song on the album, which is "Homecoming," and it deals with in 5 different stages, like the death of Saint Jimmy being the first one, and then it will be kind of Jimmy growing up. Not Jimmy, the other character, I've forgotten his name. Jesus of Suburbia. That would be then when Jesus of Suburbia is growing up and beginning to. It's in the song. Jesus is filling out paperwork now, and that's, like you say, it bleeds into what's her name, which is where he's forgotten. So it's growing up. I think the story is there, and whether they wanted to leave that up to interpretation or not, I think that the lyrics do very explicitly say that. But I mean, going back to track 2 to Jesus of Suburbia, you've got these young people or person specifically, Jesus of Suburbia, wants to leave and get out of this town and hit the road and go and do his own things. And that's rock 101, not even punk rock 101. That is like, you want to get out, you want to hit the highway, you want to move, you want to get out of there. It goes back to like Bruce Springsteen in the 70s. You've got just this idea of going out and kind of the American dream to an extent as well. And it's sort of examining that, because you want to go out, make yourself what you are, and then ultimately Jesus of Suburbia kind of lives in a house with a picket fence, but that's not necessarily where the album starts from. That's not the aim of the character to begin with. But what I love is the way that Billy Joe Armstrong can write lyrics, and the way that he specifically wrote these lyrics, because for me, I think he's never been better. And that's having, again, subsequently gone back to the albums before and listening to everything since, purely because he seemed very focused and very aware, because I'm sure we'll get into the production of it, but the fact that they had written and almost completed an album, which then got stolen or lost, and then they had to go back and completely rework. It was an anger in that. There was a sneer in that of, right, fine, if what I've already done has gone missing, I'll just do it better. And that kind of clicked him into another gear. And for me, like, Green Day have never been the same since. Green Day have never returned to the band that they were prior to American Idiot.
Yeah, because there's definitely something in the kind of, like, I said earlier, Rage is kind of like the backbone of the album, but the rage of modern life and kind of, well, what was modern America. And one of the things I think as well that I find quite interesting is that particularly in the first song, which is or the intro, American Idiot, they talk about media and television and the 24-hour news cycle. 24-hour news cycle and what you see on television, particularly, I think, and the 24-hour news cycle has got, I think, I can't remember exactly when that was a thing or when that started becoming ubiquitous.
I think for us over here, it was around about then. Whether it had been a case beforehand, it was with the advent of digital television ultimately. So
yeah, I think
it
CNN
was
and
kind of mid-90s.
I think CNN and Fox News and cable, I think, have been around for ages, but I think, it's a digital TV and the ease of being able to add more than just 5 channels. You had news channels, so you had BBC News, you had Sky News. I think Sky News was always a thing, but then it was always a thing if you had Sky. But because you then had digital TV starting coming through, and the ease of access, you'd have all these kind of like I'm saying ubiquitous all the time. You had a constant flow of news. And this was in the early noughties, and that's how you got the news and stuff. Compared to today.
Again, this is before social media, isn't it? This is before you'd go straight to Twitter to have a look at news, or you'd go straight to, like, people were still buying newspapers at this point in time. One of the reasons this has stuck so much with me is that I was a paper boy. So we touched on this briefly when you appeared on Frame to Frame. I would take a wallet of CDs out with me and a portable CD player that I would hope to God would not skip, or I had like the best anti-skip protection that you could get, but it was still really not very good. But I'd have that because I was, rock fan in those days. I had like massive jeans with massive pockets that I could fit an actual CD player in, and I would just listen to it as I was delivering newspapers, which I guess I now see as somewhat ironic. But it speaks to a time where you would either read a newspaper or you'd watch the news. Whereas now, I mean, it was, again, we're not talking the 1950s here. We're talking the start of the internet, the start of the digital age as we now know it. But at the time, that was the most popular way of consuming it. And the fact that the news cycle was beginning to ramp up so much more is like I say, it's referenced several times in the course of the album.
I think, so it's quite interesting that one of the themes is about the information, the absorption of media, which is through TV, but then this was like years before smartphones and stuff. I mean, I got the Guardian app, and several times a day, the Guardian app would buzz major news stories like, we've reached over 100,000 coronavirus cases.
It's never good news, though, is it?
No, it's not. Or like, because Boris Johnson had wine and cheese, and which for some reason is a notification worthy thing, but
I'm not touching that. I'm not getting into the politics of all this situation.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that you get that information even if you're not looking for it. You'll look on Twitter and like you'll have people post the news straight away, and you got the kind of global news at you straight away. In comparison, September 11th, I remember how I found out because what happened because we might have had phones, but we didn't. But they was just used for texting or playing Snake on the Nokia.
Yeah, it's Nokia 3310, absolutely.
Yeah. So like, and no one was texting people the news and stuff. Or you didn't have group chats. I mean, like, you didn't have group chats. You had like 10p text message, and you saved those.
That hence text speak. You literally kept your letters to a minimum.
Yeah, but you didn't have the immediate news stuff. I mean, so I remember the school coach was late, so anyone on my coach was just like waiting, and Leanne, my friend from my year, her older sister Kirsty was in sixth form, and like they either had a radio or a small TV in the sixth form common room, and like she was saying, oh yeah, apparently she mentioned something about something that happened in America about kind of like a plane crash or something. And like we just been about that. It's kind of weird, but I didn't really make much thing about it. And
whereas now you jump straight to social media and go, oh my god, what's going on? You get literal videos from the case and see
or
exactly what's happening.
You'd have because my phone, my watch is a smartwatch, and it will buzz for the majority of notifications. So I'll get Guardian notifications on my wrist before it even finishes comes on my phone. So like for example, like when there's the explosion that happened in the Middle East when the oil plant kind of blew up, that kind of thing. But yeah, so and then got home, started flicking through the music channels, right, and
as you want,
yeah, and
settling on the box for about 45 minutes and then seeing what's up.
This was actually, I think it was MTV2 actually, and I was watching the music, and I remember the music video. I'm not going to say remember the music video. I'm not going to say what the song was, but yeah, but then a news ticker appeared on MTV2 saying that there's planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. And I was like, oh, okay. And then flicked over to Sky News. But that was coming up on a non-news channel. And that's very rare that anything like that happens. It's, yeah. And the only reason that I knew that was like, it was mentioned. But then because no one noticed, we didn't really watch the news cycles or news. But then it was because that came up, and then we was pretty much just watching the news channels, just looking what happened and stuff. And then it was more or less the time that the first tower fell before the second tower fell. And it was like, and then mine was blown, but the fact that it was coming up, that's how we got information. That's how we got the news and stuff.
And it was a 24-hour news cycle back then, wasn't it? Whereas now it's a 30-minute news cycle. Things don't last unless there's a real legs to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you go and think to how Green Day were talking about it, this was the way that we'd consume our media, and the fact that they were sort of highlighting the unhealthiness of the 24-hour news cycle, the constant news updates, which is something that's only exacerbated in the years since. Yeah.
The song in question, if anyone's interested, was Uncle Cracker, Follow Me.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so that song...
So you can't listen to that the same ever again?
No, so if anyone goes, Follow Me and everything is... Kind of like disposable, kind of nice soft rock song that was like on MTV2, kind of like, just like, that never really made it big on there, but it's like kind of wrong. That song forever reminds me of 9/11. I cannot.
Wow.
Yeah, so that song is fully associated with that memory of me finding out that.
And now you've done that to me as well, and all of the listeners. So thank you very much for
Yeah.
ruining that song.
No, but I don't think it's ruined it. I think it just added an added element of poignancy. But the point being is that it was during that song that a news ticker came in, whereas but I remember vividly the graphic, whereas I probably couldn't remember. I couldn't remember like some of the key news moments that buzzed on my phone because I'm just used to it. I'm just kind of used to
that. Happens every day. That happens multiple times a day.
Yeah, and so it's kind of. I mean, I can't remember the first time. I can't remember the first time that I heard the term COVID. I remember the first time. But because the information's buzzed in there, and I think that kind of relates back to. I think Billy Joe. I think perhaps Billy Joe Armstrong with this album and that theme, perhaps a bit ahead of the time. So I think what he's trying to get at is that because we're bombarded by all this news and information on the TVs, we'll forget when it's raised, which I don't fully agree with because I think we've just proven. I think it's just proven that I think you remember a lot more TV events than perhaps you do with the phones. But if he was talking about social media about 10 years later. His point would stick. Yeah, his point would stick. So, So, if we move to the songs themselves, so which songs jump out at you? So, if you was to try and talk about this album, which songs would jump out at you as highlights?
So I think that the opening half of American Idiot, to me, in my head, is up there with the sort of side 2 of Abbey Road. The way that the first sort of 4 to 5 songs, maybe even could call it up to 6, the way that they all sort of bleed into each other. So you've got American Idiot, Jesus of Suburbia, Holiday, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, and then the questionable ones would be Are We the Waiting and St. Jimmy. And now it's no coincidence that the first 4 songs on this album were singles. You know, they were brought out, admittedly, in the wrong order. The order they were brought out was 1, 4, 3, 2, because why else would you do it in a different way? But the fact that these songs, they tell a complete story in and of themselves. They are the most focused, and that's, I think, leading back to what Billy Joe was saying about the first sort of half of the album is far more focused. And, you know, you've got American Idiot setting up the ideas and the politics of the album. Then you've got Jesus of Suburbia, which is setting up the characters, and then Holidays when he's going away onto his big adventure. He's moving away, and he's, you know, it's a massive anti-war song. And then Boulevard of Broken Dreams is dealing with the sort of aftermath. You've had the sort of major key song of Holiday. You've been really uplifted, so now you need to come down a little bit, and you have this ballad, which is basically Jesus of Suburbia walking alone through the new city that he at one point thought was his Mecca, his place where he had to go, and that's where he'd make himself. Yeah.
Interestingly, the question I was going to ask you as well. So the CD that you've got, and I've had this. I asked this question to a couple of people before recording. Have you listened to this on Spotify?
Yeah, I think I know your complaint. I think I know where this questioning is going.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
Not often, because I've got the CD, I've got the record, so not often have I listened to it on Spotify, but I did, again, sort of in prep for this, I did it, and I noticed something, which is what I think you're about to bring.
Yeah, because I asked the question about whether the way that Spotify does the tracks is the same on the CDs, which I've come to learn isn't. No. Because what happens, so on Spotify, what we've got, as I move Spotify to away off the monitor that's covered by Zoom at the moment. So yeah, so we've got American Idiot and Jesus of Suburbia. So Jesus of Suburbia is a 9-minute song, which I think is what it was supposed to be on
the album.
Yeah, so it's like 5 mini songs combined into one. Yeah, but then what you then got a period of 4 songs on Spotify which are combined together. So you've got Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams as 1 8-minute track. You've got We Are the Waiting for Jimmy as 5.5 minutes. You've got Give Me Novocaine, She's a Rebel as another song. An Extraordinary Girl and Letter Bomb merged together.
No.
And I can't figure out why. I mean, okay. Yeah, okay. So they kind of segue into each other. But previous other albums break those tracks.
No, exactly. I referenced the Beatles with Abbey Road. You can literally cut in the middle of the sort of musical suite that they've got at the end of Abbey Road on Spotify. It's literally separate tracks. Whereas, I mean, so I kind of get it to an extent on Holiday and Boulevard to Broken Dreams, because the end note on Holiday feeds in directly to the opening of Boulevard to Broken Dreams. And I mean, I don't really get it with either Give Me Novocaine or Are We the Waiting, because they don't really require it. I think St. Jimmy specifically. St. Jimmy is a shot in the arm, because you've had Boulevard of Broken Dreams and then Are We the Waiting, which is, again, more of a relaxed, less of a sort of in-your-face song. Bearing in mind, Boulevard of Broken Dreams is a ballad as well. So then you've got St. Jimmy, which is suddenly, bang, my name is Jimmy and you better not wear it out. And there's that sneer to it, there's a snarl to it. And that's why I think that Billy Joe connects with it, because that's kind of how he sings. He sings with, almost in the Elvis face. He's got that, his sort of upper lip curls and he's got that snarl. And that's what that song has. So why that would bleed into the one before, which is not that. The whole point of St. Jimmy is the fact that it starts the way that it does, that it's got this jarring, oh, okay, we're in this mode now. So yeah, I don't quite understand why they did it, but no, Jesus of Suburbia is one of the 9-minute ones, as well as Homecoming, which is track 12, but on Spotify that would probably be track 6.
It's track 8, which is weird, but yeah, it just...
Very strange.
Yeah, and I think it's weird, because Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams, I can see why it's said kind of merges into each other, but I was trying to say, but then I think there isn't a way of, I think apart from perhaps the singles themselves, I don't think that, I don't think the singles aren't there separately either.
So you can't just listen to Boulevard of Broken Dreams without having listened to Holiday first?
No, I mean...
That's baffling.
Oh, no, actually, no, say that. There is. No, okay. Right. So, Boulevard of Broken Dreams is on the Greatest Hits album on Spotify. Yeah.
Wow.
And Boulevard of Broken Dreams and Holiday are separated on the Greatest Hits, which is...
Excellent. At least there is a way.
Yeah. Which is, so, but I just I find that weird.
It's very strange. I mean, ultimately, I'm a person that would listen through an album anyway.
Oh, yeah,
the artist intended. I know this is something like Adele has brought up recently in complaining about Spotify just keeping things on shuffle, thinking, look, artists actually specifically want... They set their track listing for a reason. So that's kind of how I've always thought. So I'd rather listen to the album as intended rather than going, I'm going to listen to track 1, 6, 2... 9, like it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I also think because I think the shuffle is one of the things that happens on the free version. So like if you pay for Spotify, then you don't shuffle, which I always thought was a thing, which is I think one of those hooks that Spotify always used to get people to pay for it. But Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams themselves is again one of the songs that I was familiar with, again because it's one of those things where like, oh, I was singing it, listened to it and I knew all the words, and because I must have listened to it again through osmosis, but it was only like perhaps until like a couple of hours ago that I actually sat back and I was sitting back and actually listening to the album. So it's one of those songs you just listen to the words, stuff we never really think of. But it was only until like I was wrapping Christmas presents about few hours ago, listening to this album as last minute revision, and I started listening, and I was listening to the lyrics themselves and trying not to cut my fingers with scissors.
You need those child-friendly safety scissors.
Exactly, yeah, I was using kitchen scissors, but I never realised this was another one of these kind of like very focused on Iraq and the kind of war songs, and I never clicked that it was about that. And like I never fully understood there's the bridge where it goes, the representative of California has the floor. I never fully really thought about that line at first, and I'm assuming that the representative from California is the person that's singing the next bit, which is the Gasman line.
Seek out to the President Gasman, bombs away go your punishments.
Yeah,
and I mean they even reference you can't fight fires setting fires. That's the most in the whole album. As much as American Idiot is looking specifically at George Bush, but the most focused lines of the album are those ones where that representative from California has the floor, because that's where it lays it all out. That's the album saying, you know what, this is our remit. This is exactly boiled down and distilled as best as we can. This is what we think and why we're saying what we're saying.
Yeah, and again, reading into the President Gasman line, because apparently the Bush family was big in oil, and the gas man being the person who controls the gas, or in the it's a different energy, but like the idea being the oil, because the oil man doesn't sound as much as the the oil man doesn't sound as like
it's not quite pointed.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of like the attack on Bush and stuff, and the Boulevard of Broken Dreams. It's one of those songs that I've never really given much thought about, but again, you'll hear it, and then occasionally you'll have the kind of the chorus or the bridge to the chorus, or the one where it goes, "My shadow's the only one." When that kicks in, you kind of remember. It's one of those things you think of it, and then the chorus plays in, and you remember the melody and the chorus stuff. It's one of those songs that's always been there. Always been there as well. So again, kind of just like you never leaves you.
Well, I mean, that was massive over here. That was, I think, it went to the charts. I think it got to like number 5. So when you think at the time you had like kind of 50 Cent basically ruling the charts, and that genre of music, to have the punk song or the punk band from Green Day with Boulevard of Broken Dreams to be that high in the music charts in the UK at the time, it was, like you say, it was everywhere, especially when you go onto the alternative music TV stations. That was the outlier, that was the champion of, this is breaking out into the mainstream.
Yeah, I think it got to number 1 on the UK rock and metal charts, and it got to number 5 overall on the overall charts in the UK. But yeah, I remember that being a big thing. But out of curiosity, I see saying that, out of curiosity, American Idiot, where did that get to?
I don't remember that one.
Number 3, actually. So it got to number 3. So the single got to number 3.
And again, like that's roughly, I think, going back to the Blink-182 connection, I think that's where I Miss You got to as well. It either got to number 2 or number 3. So there was signs of the pop punk movement still alive, and you had your Sum 41s, you could Charlottes, those sorts of people. But these two bands, Blink-182 and Green Day, were the titans of the area. That, like, these were the bands, and no matter what, you definitely liked at least one of them, right? I like both, but there's no way you could be a fan of sort of rock music and not enjoy one of them at that time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Although out of the two of them, I am admittedly more Blink than I am Green Day, but.
But now you're listening to American Idiot, so you never know. Maybe it's now getting under your skin a little bit more and going, oh, there's more to this than just 3 chords and Tom DeLonge whining.
But yeah, okay. So, are there any other songs that you want to bring up before we move on? Because I've got one I want to briefly mention before we move on. But if there's any others that you want to talk about first,
I mean, I love Letter Bomb, but the final single of the album, or the single that we haven't mentioned of the album, Wait a Minute, When September Ends, I think that is just a beautiful song. And the fact that Billy Joe wrote that as a memory to his own father, and it's the way that he deals with the grief in the song, and the way that sort of progresses throughout the course of the song. You've got, summer has come and passed, 7 years will never last, and then towards the end, 20 years have gone so fast. So it's talking about how the character, and Billy Joe potentially himself, are dealing with the loss of somebody important in their lives. And I just think that the way that it was written on a very, very sort of acoustic sounding song was fantastic, as well as the fact it was then sort of merged with a song called When It's Time, so sort of a B-side from the American Idiot album, actually in the stage production. The fact that they merged the two, so you've got the melody and the music from Wake Me Up When September Ends with the lyrics of When It's Time, the fact it managed to interchange, I thought was so intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So reading on the Genius stuff, apparently it's the only song that's like not part of the story arc. It's there. I mean, they kind of put it in the stage show, but we'll talk about that a bit later on. But yeah, so I mean, I didn't realise how long ago his father passed away. Didn't realise, but yeah, I didn't realise how old Billy Joel. I thought Billy Joel Armstrong was slightly younger than his actual age. But then again, they.
I mean, it's what
like,
a life of partying will do for you, Matt. You look young. That's what they tell you, right? You go out, you do all these sorts of things. You have a great deal of fun, and I mean, you end up looking younger than I currently do, whilst he's 20 years older.
Yeah, but yeah. So like, so I think his father passed away when he was 10 years old. And allegedly the title comes from what he said to his mom when he was 10 years old. He locked himself in his room, and when his mother knocked, he replied, "Wake me up when September ends." Which, yeah, and like, because you get the kind of things that happen at the start, like the end of August, you'll have people post memes about this song and stuff, and then you'll have the people on Instagram saying you're using it in the wrong context. It's a beautiful song. But
yeah. Time to wake Billy Joe up. I get it. Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the 1st of October. Yeah.
It's interesting that it became synonymous not just with 9/11, obviously September, but also Hurricane Katrina, which hit at the end of August. So then it became sort of a discussion point around those two horrific events in the United States. And, you know, Green Day went on and recorded, they did benefit shows, and they recorded a number of songs for the, like, help Katrina and raise money for people of New Orleans. So the fact that it's talking about a month of a year, which is quite synonymous with horrible things happening in America.
I mean, yeah, it's also one of two songs. I think it gets fitted into other things. So like, When It Was September Ends can be fitted in as like, for, I don't know, it's one of those songs that you can imagine being played when England get knocked out of a tournament. It's one of those kind of songs. But it's the same kind of thing where Good Riddance as well is one of those ones that gets used quite a lot.
In the wrong context.
Yeah.
Like, you think of Good Riddance in the finale of Seinfeld sort of being a heartfelt, oh, look, we've had such great fun together and I hope you had the time of your life. Whereas, no, the title is literally Good Riddance. I'm glad you're leaving. I'm glad you're not here anymore. I can't really talk about this song without bringing up the music video either. You know, it starred Jamie Bell and Evan Rachel Wood, who at the time were sort of, you know, becoming film stars. I mean, Jamie Bell had been Billy Elliot at that point. But the story that it tells is Jamie Bell's character is enlisted, or he enlists himself in the Marine Corps because he feels that he needs to go and do something for his country. And it tells the story of the strain and the heartbreak of the relationship as a result of his character going off and going into Iraq, and he ultimately ends up being attacked by insurgents, and that's when you have the sort of guitar solo of the song. And you never really know how that ends for him or for his character. So it all feeds back into this discussion of the Iraq War, because it was directed by the same guy who directed not only the American Idiot music video from when the album first launched, but he also directed Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, Samuel Bayer. And I think that ascribing that story to this song really, really works as well. It shows how ultimately grief is universal, and you can ascribe it to a number of different stories and basically shape it however you want to, based upon the story you want to tell.
Yeah, and I think before we move on, I just want to say that there's a nice couplet, which is the "As my memory rests but never forgets what I lost." It's just one of those kind of things where it's like, well, the song and the chorus is all about grief and stuff, but it's those kind of key moments in that, like saying that yes, memories work, and you get used to grief, but it will always affect you and stuff.
Yeah, it never truly leaves you. There is always a hole based upon who you've lost.
So so that's when September ends. So right, okay. So in terms of the performance and the reception of the album, it did quite well. He got to number one.
That says something.
Yeah, he got to number one in loads of different countries. He got to number one in Australia, Austria, Canada, in Europe, Ireland, Norway, Scotland, Sweden, Switzerland, the UK. He got to number one. Oh, actually, yeah, he got to number one on the actual albums chart. I didn't realise he got the high. He also got to number one on the rock and metal albums chart and number one on the US Billboard 200. Got to number two in Finland, Greece, New Zealand, Argentina, 3 in Holland, Germany, 3rd in Japan, etc., etc., etc. In the year-end lists, he got to, I think, he got to 18th in the UK. It was like the 11th worldwide album in terms of performance in 2004. So yeah, so it's done quite well now. So worldwide, it sold 16 million. It sold 6.2 million in the US alone. It sold 4 million in Europe. 7 times platinum in the UK with 2.1 million. So,
I mean, it'd be interesting to know the demographics.
Yeah.
This is now impossible data to get, but it would be very interesting to understand, because I think this album speaks very much to a disenfranchised youth and the idea, I don't know where I'm going and I don't know what I'm going to get when I get there. And that's what I think this is. I mean, we've sort of touched on all the other stuff that it's about, but the sort of main through arc of it for me is thematically, where are we going? What are we doing? Is what we're doing now a good idea for the future?
And I think it's themes that are kind of universal for now. I mean, yeah. So, and again, as we said earlier, some of the stuff I think he kind of predates he kind of predicts how people will have a relationship to social media. And again, and particularly with the civil and societal kind of movements that have been happening over the last couple of years as well. I think, well, perhaps.
So what you're getting at is we could end up with an album called British Idiot.
It's just.
I wonder who that would be labelled to. Who'd be the one to take those barrels right in the face?
Yeah, there's always that feeling that the art's conveying that we need to do something, but I kind of feel as if, particularly with what's been happening with certain movements this year, that we kind of almost in the sequel to American Idiot. So like what people were starting to say, like what could theoretically should be happening, is beginning to happen in society and stuff. But we've not seen much of. I think we still got more impact to be felt of what's happening. We're kind of in the middle of all sorts of stuff at the moment, but I think there is kind of like, particularly with Gen Z and the TikTok generation. There's probably a better name for the TikTok generation, but Gen Z are kind of, there's a new progressive movement that I think is going to affect societal change, which I think is what American Idiot was kind of alluding to, or what we could be doing. And I think we're finally getting to the point where it should be happening.
Well, it was a call to arms, wasn't it? That's what the album was sort of intended to be. And, people to an extent picked up that baton. You look at the politics of the last 15 years around it. The fact that America veered more to the left and then went even to more extreme to the right. I mean, it's something that Green Day themselves have looked at. I mean, this is looking more to the future of what they did subsequently, but it's what they looked at with Father of All Mothers, and I'm not going to say the complete title of the album, because that was a direct reaction to the Trump presidency.
But yeah,
so it's something that they try and keep up with. I think it's kind of Billy Joe's idea and remit to go, you know what, if I don't like something, then I am absolutely going to be vocal about it, and I will basically champion as much as I can, to the extent that the cover of the Father of All album is basically the cover of American Idiot, but from a slightly different angle, a slightly different framing.
Yeah. In terms of critical reception of it, the Metacritic has an average score of 79 based on 26 reviews.
Not bad.
AllMusic said it earned Green Day easily the best reviewed album of their career. Website editor Stephen Thomas Erlewine praised the album as either a collection of great songs or as a whole, writing that in its musical muscle and sweeping politically charged narrative is something of a masterpiece. Pitchfork deemed it ambitious and successful in getting across its message while keeping its mood and method deliberately, tenaciously and angrily on point. NME categorised it as an onslaught of varied and marvellously good tunes presented in an unexpectedly inventive way. Q called it an album... No. Q called the album a powerful work, noble in intent and execution. New York Times commended Green Day for trumping... pun not intended. Any pretension with melody and sheer fervour. Chicago Sun-Times critic Jim Regatis wrote that the band successfully hit upon an actual adult style of pop punk, while USA Today's Edna Gunderson wrote they steered away from the cartoonish qualities of their previous work in favour of a more mature, politically correct themes. On the flip side, a bit more of the critical aspect of it, Entertainment Weekly said despite being based on a musical theatre concept that periodically makes no sense, a bit more on that a bit later, Green Day makes the journey entertaining enough, and describes some of the songs as forgettable though, arguing the album focuses more on lyrics than music. Rolling Stone said the album could have been and was a mess, but that the individual tunes are tough and punchy enough to work on their own.
Is this the same Rolling Stone that categorised it as number 22 in the top 100 albums of the decade?
Possibly, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Just wanted to double check that.
The Guardian called it a mess, but a vivid, splashy, and even courageous mess. I mean, I love the Guardian, but the Guardians come up a few times in kind of. If the Guardian reviewed it now, they would probably praise it because I think, on political levels, because a lot of the themes are very pro Guardian, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So,
but it speaks to a different time. It speaks to the fact that the publication was probably not as left-leaning as it is now,
and
it didn't feel that it needed to be as far as the editorial was. If you see what I mean.
In a name that's appeared a few times on this podcast, Robert Christgau of the Village Voice called the album a dud and asserted that Armstrong's lyrics eschew social political content for the emotional travails of two clueless punks, one passive, one aggressive, both projections of the auteur. There are no economics, no race, hardly any compassion. Which is...
I think he skipped Wake When September Ends, saying there's no compassion.
Yeah. But, so it won a bunch of awards. It won a Grammy Award for Best Rock Album in 2005, nominated 6 of the categories, including Album of the Year. It won 7 of 8 awards it was nominated for in the 2005 MTV Music Awards. In 2009, Kerrang named American Idiot the best album of the decade. NME ranked it 60 in a similar list, and Rolling Stone ranked it 22nd. He also listed...
The Rolling Stone that hated it, that's cool. Just wanted to highlight that.
They also listed Bollywood of Broken Dreams and American Idiot amongst the 100 best songs of the 2000s at number 65 and 47 respectively. So
I think that it deserves its place there, not just for on a personal level. I've sort of explained how it meant so much to me and why I listened to it so much and why I connected with it so much. But the fact, in a wider societal level, on a sort of macro level, what it was talking about was important, and it was an important voice for a disenfranchised youth, and the fact that it sort of validated a different viewpoint, because there wasn't a lot of politically charged music around. There was, I mean, you mentioned Eminem earlier on, but everyone was sort of caught up in the cowboyness of the post 9/11 world. Like to an extent, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, George W. Bush basically took on the role of John Wayne. He was like, I'm going to find them and I'm going to catch them and I'm going to put them to justice, that sort of thing. And I think for a long while that had kind of been accepted, and that was, okay, you can lead us forward, you know what you're doing. And then, some other things began happening and other wheels started turning, and that's where I think this album managed to land. Was there were a load of people that were thinking about, is this right? Should we be doing this? And it kind of validated that school of thought, because it said it in such an eloquent way, and it's very, very pointed at its administrations and its message of anti-war, not necessarily anti-this war, but anti-all wars.
I think as well as this was just before the immediate reaction, and the immediate media wasn't as easily accessible. So you didn't have, like, for example, if Green Day suddenly released another album or just dropped something, you wouldn't be able to listen to the whole thing within seconds because it wouldn't be on Spotify. Spotify didn't exist then. Going back to, and
you have to go out to a record shop and actually buy it.
And buy it on because buy it with money and own the physical CD and try and find somewhere for me to fit the damn thing.
Oh, I've got boxes in my attic of copious amounts of CDs, and I've already run out of. I started buying vinyls probably about 2 years ago, and I've already run out of space for those.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, same. Yep. Yeah. So I thought, I haven't got room for CDs. Let's buy vinyl. But yeah, so the immediate reaction stuff isn't there. So the immediate reaction of things just wouldn't be immediate. Whereas if we take into effect a few months ago, did Taylor Swift and within kind of the election that happened there, she kind of mentioned about supporting a Democratic candidate because the Republican didn't stand for what she wanted to do, and the uptake of immediately there was an uptake of people who didn't vote, wasn't registered to vote, suddenly registered to vote, and she had an impact and stuff which you wouldn't have got in 2004 because the message wouldn't have been immediate. No. So you wouldn't, if Billy Joe Armstrong suddenly went, you need to vote for Barack Obama because whoever.
Well, ultimately, that's where it led to, wasn't it? That was you had this sort of voice of the voiceless, effectively, managed to get this message out there, and it kind of seeped through along with a number of other factors that fed into Obama. I'm not going to say that Obama got elected because of Green Day. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But hey, it was a factor. It was it's an interesting cultural footnote of the fact that at the time there was a movement of trying to begin to re-engage a disenfranchised youth.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Have you ever seen Green Day live?
I have. I missed... So I so desperately wanted to get onto to see the tour for American Idiot, because ultimately they basically play the whole album. But that came very, very... I was 14 at the time. It would have involved going into Cardiff, which was, staying out late at 11:30 sort of thing. So that just wasn't on the agenda. But I managed to see them a few years later when they'd done the trilogy of albums of Unos, Dos and Tres. So it was about 2012, 2013 that I saw them, and they played a good number of songs from American Idiot, but they'd done also, and I'm sure we'll get to this when we talk about what we listen to next, but they did a number of songs from the 21st Century Breakdown as well. But when you bear in mind, up to that point, they had done, 4 or 5 albums prior to American Idiot. They also played a good mix of those songs as well. Yeah. But the short answer is, yes, I managed to see them at the Emirates Stadium, and it is the only time I would ever go into Arsenal Stadium.
So you've only ever seen them, so it's only the once you've seen them, or?
I've only seen them once. I was trying to go and see them again, sort of pre-COVID. But things got cancelled, didn't they? So
I've not seen them at all. But I think they've toured a few times with Frank Turner and Blink-182 a couple of times, which would have been a very interesting lineup.
I mean, it would have been great to have seen Blink-182 and Green Day at the same gig, but to do that when Blink were actual Blink.
Yeah, and at perhaps, around 2003 Blink, perhaps.
Yeah,
I think I
Mark, Tom and Travis show. That's what you want to see.
Yes.
As much as Matt is bringing what he's bringing to Blink-182, that they're still not Blink-182.
Yeah. So I said earlier, I've watched the American Idiot show. I saw it at the Hippodrome, the Alexandra in Birmingham, quite a few years ago. Have you ever seen that, or?
I have. I've seen that twice, so I've seen that more than I've seen seen Green Day. And I've got the album. I've got the cast recording of it, and listened to that a number of times because I just like the. So they expand on the story and they include some songs from the subsequent album, 21st Century Breakdown, because that kind of picks up on similar sorts of themes, just to try and expand the story, make the story probably a bit more clear. But yes, I've seen and I actually do enjoy the show.
I can't remember much about it. If I'm completely honest. But I do remember going, oh yeah, I know this song, and I know this song. But so I can't remember much about it, so I can't really say if I remember liking it
It
or
clearly
not.
made its impression.
To be fair, I think I might have remembered more if I really enjoyed it, but I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I fully
I-
understood what was going on because I perhaps didn't have the knowledge that much of the original album. So if I knew the albums a bit more in detail, I probably would have appreciated it a lot more, I think.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's probably not one for a casual fan. It's not so much like it hasn't got such a clear through story as I referenced Tommy earlier. It hasn't got that clearness or clarity of its storytelling, and even by adding and expanding the things that they do by including different songs, I wouldn't be 100% if you'd be able to get every aspect of the story on a first watch.
And I think as well, I think it was a case that, you know, if you've got a friend that works in a theatre and sometimes they get tickets to fill in empty seats and they're a lot cheaper, it was one of those type of things. So I was like, oh yeah, I know a few Green Day songs, I'll go and watch that. But yeah, if people...
Whereas I chose and actually paid money to go and watch it twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I probably wouldn't have paid full price for it again. But I'm glad I went. I'm glad I went. Just probably to say that. I had
Super glad now, because at least you had some sort of experience of listening to it.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So if people listen to this, have listened to American Idiot, and then perhaps want to go on to explore other Green Day albums, where would you suggest they go to next?
I mean, the obvious starting point is Dookie, right? So we've skipped over it a lot because there's an awful lot to say about American Idiot in and of itself. But Dookie is one of the big punk albums of the 1990s, so you kind of have to start there. Green Day managed to. So the sort of trajectory was that they were sort of doing okay. They were on the rise, and then bang, Dookie hit, and they were huge. And then they sort of started to wane somewhat, and then they ended up with the Missing album. Which, for all we know, is the best Green Day album that anyone has ever heard, but no one will ever will. So, and then American Idiot came along and just, again, shot them back to that stratosphere. In terms of similar themes, you've got to look at 21st Century Breakdown. It was the album that they did sort of immediately afterwards, so it was in 2009. And I referenced Father of All, let's call it, which was released, that's their latest album to date, which was released in 2020, and that picks up on similar sorts of themes to American Idiot as well.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look into that. Right, so the important question is, and the most important thing is the song for the Spotify playlist. So for those of you listening for the first time, what this is, I'm going to ask Andy to pick one song from the album to be immortalised forever on the Spotify playlist. I can't veto it, so whatever he says goes, and I'm slightly worried he's going to pick two songs. He's going to pick the two songs on the Spotify that Spotify merged together.
It's only one track on the Spotify playlist.
Right.
So...
Oh, okay. So which song are you going to pick onto the Spotify playlist?
Well, I'm going to annoy you even more, and I'm going to basically do what Colin did with the Bright Eyes album.
God damn it.
I think Jesus Suburbia, for me, is just such a masterpiece of storytelling. So I'm picking 5 songs in one here, because what it does is it introduces us to our character, it sets up his environment, and then it tells us a little bit sort of his motivations and the fact that he's from the broken home and why he wants to leave. So I think that it's, considering it's 9 minutes long, it doesn't feel 9 minutes. And the way that it breaks itself down, I think it's a beautiful song in terms of its instrumentation, its lyrics, and how it feels and how it manages to set everything up. So no, I'm not going to pick 2 songs that have combined together, but I'm going to pick 5 songs that have combined together, and that is a grand total of 9 minutes and 8 seconds.
Right, so it's not as long as the Bright Eyes one, but it makes a change. I can moan about you now instead of just mentioning Colin every time this comes in. But so it's I'm gonna have to let him know. I'm gonna have to let him know that.
Sorry to have usurped him. He's gonna have to come back and pick. I mean, if you do 2112 by Rush, I'm sure there's something on there.
He's threatened to pick. He's threatened to pick all sorts of tracks with very long songs. So then that said, he has picked, and that said, he has actually on the day of it recording the latest episode is in fact the only episode where the episode is actually shorter than the album in question. But
Wow.
Oh, no, yeah. Oh, actually, no. With the exception of the Blacklist from Metallica, actually. I perhaps shouldn't have said that. But, But, yeah, so Jesus of Suburbia goes on to the Spotify playlist. And I think perhaps second in the, if I sort by duration. So,
I'm a little bit gutted it's second, if I'm honest. But what can you do?
right, okay. If you come on again, I have to be careful which album you pick next time. Because, oh, there's an album with an 11-minute song. I wonder why he's picking that one for. But
I mean, the Decemberists have got some pretty long songs, so I might come back and do one of those.
So, we are at the end of our conversation, Andy, and it's been great. It's been great chatting to you. It's been, I think, me finally, after 17 years, finally getting around to listening to American Idiot properly. So if people want to find you and your podcast, where can they find you?
So we're also a part of the We Made This podcast network. I do Frame to Frame every week with a gentleman that I work with, actually. He works as part of the Cineworld team and has written for like Little White Lies and whatnot, and Den of Geek and all sorts of sort of movie publications. So we discuss films every week, and we basically take two seemingly unconnected films and slam them together in the most sort of shonky theme that you can think of. So yeah, we do that every week. We're up to, I believe, at time of recording, about 81 episodes. So we'll be pushing 100 sometime early next year, which I'm looking forward to. So that's Frame to Frame. You can find us on Instagram, Letterboxd, Facebook. I mean, the handles are sort of all Frame to Frame, and you can find us on the We Made This website as well. We were, honoured to have you on as a guest to basically blow Sean's mind.
Yeah,
and
I think retroactively, I know what the theme was, but I'm now retroactively going to be telling people that the theme was films that break Sean.
I mean, that's my remit. I try deliberately to wind him up. So we did Switched Up Birth films, didn't we? Which was Twin Dragons and
Splitting Heirs.
Splitting Heirs,
yeah.
That's right. The Eric Idle one, yeah. And yeah, I think that just basically broke Sean in two, which I enjoyed just for that.
Yeah, I think after just saying that, I don't think Sean's ever done an episode where he's hated both before, and I feel so proud.
Well, no, because we've actually done. We did the theme of movies that made us angry. So I deliberately tried to wind him up because he then chose the Emoji Movie, which he then had to watch. But then, so I then chose Shrek, but he was quite happy about that. So yeah, you'll have to listen to the episode to understand exactly why I'm in the minority of getting angry by Shrek, basically.
Yeah, it should be interesting. But no, yeah, do give Frame to Frame a listen. Great podcast, and I've listened to quite a few of them now, and a lot of fun to listen to, and I could recommend it enough. And with that, Andy, I think it's time we have to say goodbye, unfortunately. But again, thank you ever so much for coming on.
Well, thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to discuss this album and introduce you to American Idiot, I guess.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming. Elsewhere on We Made This. Chucky Vision.
The next poll is a little bit more interesting. It was Survive or Die Again with the adult characters. And the characters were Logan, Bree, Michelle, and Detective Evans. And the Chucky Vision listeners predicted that Detective Evans would survive the week before she died on the show.
I remember that, yeah. That we made that poll. Well, I was going to say premature. We made that poll probably at the perfect time.
Yeah, I think so. And they also predicted that the character that would die would be Michelle. And looking at the characters, Michelle is the only one of the four that actually survived.
Free with this month's issue.
I was looking up what the point of the band name was, because obviously Black Country being sort of like about a mile away from where I am right now.
Yeah.
Black Country New Road, they have said it's a metaphor for a good way out of a bad place. So, fuck you! Not going to endear themselves too many Midlanders with that. Dudley Zoo and Wolverhampton Civic Hall are fucking ace.
Yep, both of those places. Well done, Colin.
Yeah.
Successfully defended yourself with 2 locations.
I have. Alright, West Midland Safari Park's pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
Frame to frame.
This episode was our Christmas horror film episode.
Yeah.
Now you mention Gremlins.
Whoa.
Where was that a week ago?
Well, I mean, what can I say?
I mean, genuinely, this is
you should have consulted the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and you would have been able to see this situation happening before it did. So
this is episode 81 of the podcast, right? And I will flat out say to you now, this is the worst film I've watched for this podcast. It is worse than Sextet. It is worse than Cats. I just hated everything.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.